Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and what I want to talk about today is the next step in my playlist on testing. So basically the idea is this. In the first video we learned about this tool, CircleCI. And in CircleCI we could connect our GitHub repositories, and with a config file it'll automatically detect commands that we wanted to test out to make sure that our Git repository is working, and then all the main functions and tools that we need working are working. So where do those tests come from? We have to make those tests, and there's several different testing libraries, a lot. So I figured we would look into one, and one of them is Jest. Okay, so it's just a test. Okay, now, so basically to install Jest in your project, so an npm project or node project, this is the command: npm install save dev jest. And the reason why you have to use the save dev is because Jest is not something you need for your site to do what it does. It's a dev dependency, meaning it's a tool to help you develop. It's not a tool to develop with, per se, in the sense that you don't need it in production. So this is not one of those things that you're going to want necessarily. Let's say you're deploying the Heroku. You don't want Heroku to install this particular dependency because it won't need it in that environment. So this is why sometimes you will make a separate distinction between your production dependencies, the things you need for your website to run and offer the features for your user, versus your dev dependencies, which are tools that help you develop the website. Cool. So we do that. Now, once you do that, you'll have your node modules. We'll take a look in your package.json folder. And what you're going to want to do is set up little scripts. So in that scripts area of your package.json, you just want to make sure there's a test that says test Jest. Okay. So basically what the way Jest works is that you have your JavaScript file. So here we have a sum.js. This is pretty much straight out of the Jest documentation. And this is a function. So I made a function that adds two numbers. Okay, function sum a, b, return a plus b. And now what we're going to do is we're going to export that function. So we export that function, and I need it to, well, be tested. So what you do is you just create a test file, and the test files always have this sort of naming convention. So it's a name.test.js. So Jest is going to look for those test.js files and run those whenever we run Jest. So what this does is here we're going to bring in, since we exported the sum function at the end of this file, we can bring it in here. So we're going to say, hey, we need that sum file. Okay, and then basically the way this reads is we are doing a test. And that test function takes in a couple parameters. The first parameter is just the name. Okay, so kind of like you see here, I ran the test. And you see here's the name of that test, so that way you know which test was running. And then what it does, and you can do that as a callback. So here's a callback. So again, it's just basically a function. Is a second parameter that is the test. And the way this works is that this expect function basically says that we expect anything that's passed in as a parameter. So the expression passed in as a parameter, we expect it to be this. So we're expecting the result of sum 1, 2 to be 3. If that's true, you pass the test. So that means this thing adds multiple numbers. And I can make multiple tests. So let's say I want to make a separate test. I want to call it 3 plus 4 is equal to 7. 3 plus 4 is equal to 7. Okay, so now I have two tests. I'm testing this, and then you may want to do that for a particular function where maybe there's several different possibilities of kind of input that can come in, and you want to make sure it can handle it all. You'll do lots of tests. But let's watch what happens when I run the Jest command, or test command. So I do npm run test, that test script we created a second ago. So it's running the test, Do. Okie dokie. And it found 0 responsibilities, but it only passed one test. And did it pass the second test? Yes, here we go. adds 3 plus 4 equals 7. And test suites, 1 total. Tests, 2 pass, 2 total. Cool. And I guess each test suite is each test file. So essentially that's how that basically works. You're just setting up these tests and you can run them whenever you want to make sure that everything you want to work works. Now let's say, so we're moving on from testing the function to testing object assignment. So basically what happens here is that basically an object is being constructed of multiple variables and you want to make sure that it's constructed the way you expect it to be constructed. Okay? So here we're saying, so we're doing a test and it was called object assignment, and we're creating an object called data which has one property, 1, which equals 1. Now we're going to create a new property, data property 2, which equals 2. So we're going to say, hey, we expect data to be 1, 2. Let's see if this works. So let's run that test. So basically, theoretically, if data equals 1, 2, which it should because we added 1 and we added 2, so let npm run test. And let's see what happens. Oh, one of the tests failed. Let's see which one failed. So I take a look here. It's the object assignment test that failed. Okay. Object is equality. If it should pass with deep equality, replace it with 2b with 2 strict equal. So you serialize it as the same string. 2b, 1, 2. Okay. So the problem is when you're testing whether an object's value, you can't use to be. Okay, because it uses like this object is function, which is really checking the absolute value of the numerical mathematical value, not necessarily the value of the set. So what we need to do is change this to equal. Okay, so when you're doing this kind of test, you need the to equal command. So we'll save that and let's run the test again and see if it works now. So sometimes the problem isn't that your test is wrong or that your programming is wrong. Sometimes your test is wrong. So you got to be paying attention and read the documentation so you know which tests to run for which situation. Okay, so this time all tests are passed. Okay, object assignment, 3 plus 4 equals 7, and 1 plus 2 equals 3. So yay. Okay. Now, sometimes it's not important whether your function does a thing. Maybe it's important that your function doesn't do a thing, or your code doesn't do a thing. So here's an example of how to test if your code doesn't have a result. So in the sense that here we're going to be adding positive numbers. Adding positive numbers should never result in 0 unless you're adding 0 and 0. But then 0, the question is 0 a positive number? So let's just say any non-zero positive numbers. So basically what this does, this is just a for loop constantly doing 1 through 10 for A and B and adding them together. There's no possible way that should ever result in 0, but we want to make sure that our brains are working and our logic is correct. So we know that the result should never be 0, but maybe we did something wrong with our loops or our code that resulted in a situation in which it would be 0. So what we do is we put the code in there and nested in there. When we would add the numbers, we expect A plus B. So basically first it says, hey, A is going to be 1, then B will be 2, 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, all the way through 10. Then A will be 2, and then B will be 1 through 10. So it's basically testing all these possibilities of addition of the numbers 1 through 10 until it gets to the end, which would be 10 plus 10. And each time it's asking, it's basically this, when this runs, the test is passed if it's not 0, not to be 0. Okay, the result of this is not to be 0. Okay, and let's run that test. It's running the test. For passed. See, it ran the test. And again, it gave you more information. So when a test failed earlier, so it gave you much more information, show you kind of where it thinks the error is. So which is also pretty useful. So you think Boolean values would be really simple, true and false, and generally most things are true except for a few things that are false. So typically in most like if statements, you know, things like false would be something that's null, undefined, 0, false. Those values would all be treated as falsy. It's a false type thing. Well, everything else, so if I just wrote cat, that would be treated as true, because anything that's just a value is true. But sometimes we need to be a little bit more specific. So there's a bunch of different tests that you can run. So let's just paste this code into here and explore it. So here, what if you really if you specifically want null? You don't want the value of false in there. You don't want the value, you can do something like to be null. Is the value of this thing null? Is it like, is it defined, meaning does it actually have a value? Is it undefined? Okay, so is the result undefined? Not null, not false, but undefined. Is the result truthy, meaning it could be anything that would resolve to true, or to be falsely, anything that would resolve to be false. So that means it could be null or 0 or false, etc. Okay, now again, exactly everything that's truthy and falsy in JavaScript, there are tables and websites that'll explain all that. Okay, JavaScript is definitely one of the more fun languages to figure out what's falsy and truthy in. Yeah, so let's take a look, and then here we're doing the same thing with 0. So 0 not null. So let's take a look at the results of that test. Actually, it's really like 6 tests for each. 1, 2, 3, 5 tests for each scenario. So here we go. So we should definitely have some failures here. We'll see where it goes. Let's see, object assignment. Oh, I see, because they threw in the not. Because the not means the opposite. So, so to be defined. So no. So I guess it's defined because it's not undefined. And it's not undefined, so that passes that test. And it's not truthy, because again, we have those not keywords there. So technically, yeah, it passes all these tests. It is null is falsy. Null, it does count as a definition. Null is null. Null is not technically undefined. And it's not truthy. While 0 is not null, is a definition, is a value. So it's basically generally if a variable doesn't get defined, it's known as undefined. So for something to be null or 0, something has to have a value had been assigned of some sort. A value had to be created. Okay, not to be undefined. Yep, it's not undefined. It's not truthy. It is falsy. So yeah, no, pass all the tests. So, but yeah, those are a bunch of tests that are available to you to test sort of Boolean stuff. Now at this point, I think you guys get the idea that Jest can be used to make all sorts of tests. And there's tests for like numbers, strings, arrays. Okay, reading the Jest documentation is a lot of cool stuff. Now most of those tests will error out if you try to do something asynchronous, because the test will be done before the asynchronous actions have taken place. So you do have special ways of testing asynchronous code. So that's all talks about over here. Okay. And then you have all sorts of other stuff you can do with Jest. But mostly it's running tests, creating these test files. And once those test files are in place, then you can kind of configure the Circle CI configuration files to run those tests every time you deploy the Git. And we'll probably explore that a little bit more in a future video. So we'll continue talking about testing and this kind of stuff as we go in this series. But thank you guys very much. I will see you guys later on. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com.